Today, we're diving into a really massive shift that's happening right now in enterprise tech. It's this quiet revolution in how companies see inside their own incredibly complex systems. And it's all about moving from total chaos to genuine clarity. Let's get into it. So let me ask you a question. Do you ever feel like your monitoring tools are actually creating more problems than they solve? I mean, you've got all these platforms that are supposed to give you visibility, but instead, you're just drowning in alerts, you're tangled in complexity, and you're paying these absolutely massive bills. If that's hitting a little too close to home, well, you're definitely not alone. So to really understand where we're going, we first have to get a handle on the problem. And the problem is, the traditional way we've been monitoring our digital infrastructure isn't just showing its age, it's actively holding businesses back. It's broken. Honestly, this is the perfect analogy. Just imagine having a different, completely incompatible charger for your phone, your laptop, your tablet, your headphones. It would be a nightmare, right? Well, that's exactly what's been happening in enterprise tech. Every monitoring tool came with its own special proprietary agent, its own data format, and to get a complete picture, your engineers are just constantly trying to plug and unplug things, trying to translate between all these different systems. It's inefficient, it's so frustrating, and it just does not scale. And you know those incompatible chargers? They have very real-world consequences. We've seen huge companies juggling 5, 10, and in some wild cases, an incredible 70 different monitoring platforms. This creates these totally disconnected silos of data, which means nobody, and I mean nobody, has the full story. You get locked into these expensive vendor contracts, your costs just spiral out of control, and your teams get buried under this mountain of alerts. It just leads to burnout and fatigue. The system is fundamentally broken. Okay. So, the old way is a mess. We get it. But what if there was a universal standard? You know, like a USB-C for all of this data? What if there was one common language? Well, that brings us to the solution, OpenTelemetry. Now, it's really important to get this. OpenTelemetry, or OTel as you'll hear it called, it's not just another monitoring tool. It's a foundational, open-source standard for how you create and collect performance data. And get this, it's backed by every single major cloud and observability company out there. It's the fastest growing project in the cloud-native computing foundation, second only to Kubernetes. This is the universal translator we have all been waiting for. And the difference this standard makes? Well, it's like night and day. In the old world, you were basically handcuffed to a vendor. If you wanted to switch, you had to tear everything out and start all over again. A massive, expensive project. With OpenTelemetry, your instrumentation is totally separate from the vendor. You can switch your backend analytics tool without changing a single line of your code. You go from having all these data silos to a single unified model, which gives you complete ownership and control over your own telemetry. It's a total game changer. Now, I know this all sounds great on paper, right? But what about the actual results? Let's look at the hard numbers, the real-world business impact that companies are seeing right now from making this switch. First up, a huge number, 60%. This is the average reduction in something called mean time to resolution, or MTTR. That's just a fancy way of saying the critical time it takes from when a problem starts to when it's actually fixed. By getting one unified view of their data with OpenTelemetry, companies are cutting that time by more than half. And that means shorter outages, a better customer experience, and, most importantly, it protects your revenue. Okay, get ready for this next one, 94%. Remember the chaos of having 70 different monitoring tools? By standardizing, one company slashed that number all the way down to just 4. That is a 94% reduction in complexity. Just try to imagine the operational headache that just vanishes. The licensing costs, the training, the constant context switching for your engineers, gone. And all of that, of course, brings us to the bottom line, a 70% reduction in costs. When you're not locked into these ridiculously expensive proprietary licenses anymore, and you've consolidated your tools, the savings are just massive. For a large enterprise, this single change can translate into millions of dollars freed up every single year. Money you can now invest in innovation instead of just, keeping the lights on. And if you're thinking, okay, but is anyone really doing this yet? The answer is a resounding yes. This isn't some niche, futuristic tech. The market has spoken. Almost half of enterprises are already using OpenTelemetry, and another quarter are actively planning to implement it. So you add that up, that's nearly 74% of the entire market moving to this new standard. The momentum is just undeniable. So we've seen the numbers, and they're pretty incredible. But what does this actually look like in practice? Out in the wild? Let's dive into two very different, very high-stakes industries to see how this standard is really being applied. First up, financial services. This is an industry where the stakes could not possibly be higher. They're driven by intense regulatory pressure, the need to manage risk down to the millisecond, and this absolute demand for performance in things like high-frequency trading. Every single transaction has to be traceable, secure, and instant. And you don't have to take my word for it. As one financial services executive put it, OpenTelemetry gives them the exact flexibility and control they need for compliance, all while letting them avoid vendor lock-in. For them, it's not just about being more efficient. It's about having strategic control over their data and really their own destiny. Okay, now let's switch gears to a completely different world, retail and e-commerce. Their priorities are different, but they are just as critical. Here, it's all about managing costs, handling those massive traffic spikes during events like Black Friday, and, this is crucial, understanding exactly how system performance impacts sales. For retail, the results are just as stark. Take this number, $3 million. That's the annual savings one major global retailer achieved. How they do it? They standardized on OpenTelemetry, which finally allowed them to consolidate that sprawling mess of tools and just slash their licensing fees. That's $3 million that can now go back into improving the customer experience. And the scale of that change is just captured perfectly in this quote from a retail leader. Can you even imagine the operational nightmare of trying to manage 70 different tools? By standardizing, they didn't just save millions of dollars, they actually improved their visibility into how their systems were performing during the most critical shopping seasons. So the evidence is pretty clear, right? This is the direction the entire industry's heading. But what does the future hold, and more importantly, how can you and your organization get there? Let's map out the path forward. Well, the future is being built on this open foundation. In fact, most analysts are predicting that OTel will be the default standard by 2025. And on top of that, we're going to see even deeper insights with things like code-level profiling and the rise of AI to automatically find the root cause of problems, moving us all from being reactive to finally being proactive. And the best part is, getting there doesn't have to be some giant, painful project. It can be a manageable, strategic process. The recommended path starts small with the pilot program in the first few months just to prove the value. Then you expand to your most critical services. And finally, you optimize, fine-tuning costs and integrating those more advanced features. It's a phased approach that delivers real value every single step of the way. So this brings us to the final question, and it's really one for you to think about. As the world moves to this open, flexible, and way more cost-effective standard, is your organization's strategy built for the future? Or is it still locked in the complex and costly models of the past? It's definitely something to consider.